The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than 3 football fields. Soft blue light came from the ceiling, making the white marble floors shine. In the center, Ambassador Diane Harper stood tall in her navy blue Earth uniform. She took a deep breath as she looked at the 17 alien representatives sitting in a half-circle in front of her. After 50 years of humans exploring space, this was the first real chance for Earth to join the Galactic Council. Diane knew everything depended on these talks. Behind her stood Commander Frank Nichols, his face serious as he watched the aliens with careful eyes. "The Council recognizes the human representative," said Zix Forel, the lead council member. His purple skin wrinkled around his 6 eyes as he spoke. "We hope today marks the beginning of a new chapter between our peoples." Diane nodded politely, but she noticed how Zix Forel's mouth twisted when he said the word human. Not a good sign. "Thank you, Elder Zix Forel," she said. "Earth is grateful for this opportunity to discuss peace." The Arcturian elder tapped his long fingers on the table. "Peace requires trust, Ambassador Harper. Your species has shown remarkable aggression in its expansion. Some council members worry about human unpredictability." Frank shifted his weight behind Diane. She knew he wanted to speak up, but this wasn't the time for military men to talk. This was her arena. "With respect, Elder," Diane replied. "Humanity expanded into empty systems. We have never taken territory from any council race. What you call aggression, we call protecting our people." A low murmur swept through the chamber. The Javari representative, a tall insect-like being, clicked her mandibles in what Diane recognized as approval. At least one potential ally here. Zix Forel waved a hand dismissively. "Let us move to the terms of potential human membership." He pressed a button, and a large screen appeared in the air between them. "The Council proposes the following conditions." Diane read the list with growing concern. The terms required Earth to reduce its fleet by 70%, share all technological developments with the Council for approval, accept Council monitors at all major spaceports, and limit new colony development. In exchange, humans would receive observational membership status and limited trading rights with Council worlds. "These terms seem unbalanced," Diane said carefully. "What protection guarantees would Earth receive if we reduce our defense capabilities?" The Terex representative, a reptilian being named Drakmor, leaned forward. "The Council provides protection to all member species, but full protection comes with full membership, which humans have not yet earned." Frank coughed behind her, their agreed signal that he needed to speak with her. Diane nodded slightly. "The Earth delegation requests a 1-hour recess to review these terms," she announced. In the private room behind the chamber, Frank didn't hide his anger. "This isn't a peace offer. It's surrender terms. They want us defenseless." Diane activated the quantum communicator. A hologram of Admiral Samantha Wells appeared, her gray hair pulled back tightly. "We received the terms, Ambassador," the Admiral said. "They're worse than we expected." "What should we do?" Diane asked. "Keep talking. We need time," the Admiral replied. "Our ships are detecting unusual movements near the Centauri border. Several Council vessels changing position." Frank frowned. "They're preparing for something, regardless of these talks." Diane nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. They fear us, but they need this to look legitimate. Earth Central Command authorizes you to negotiate better terms," Admiral Wells said. "But don't commit to anything. We need to understand their real intentions." The communicator switched off. Diane straightened her uniform and turned to Frank. "Let's go back in there and play their game," she said. "But keep your eyes open. I think these peace talks might not be about peace at all." Frank nodded. "Always am, Ambassador. Always am." They walked back into the council chamber, faces calm despite the storm brewing inside them. The real challenge was just beginning. 3 days into the peace talks, Diane sat alone in her quarters on the human diplomatic vessel. The large window showed the beautiful blue-green planet of Centauri Prime below. She rubbed her tired eyes and activated the secure quantum link to Earth. Admiral Samantha Wells appeared on the screen. She looked worried. "We have new information, Ambassador," the Admiral said. "Our long-range scouts have detected Terex warships gathering near the Epsilon system. That's only 2 jumps from our colony on New Dakota." Diane frowned. "How many ships?" "At least 30. All heavy cruisers or larger." Admiral Wells showed her the images. "This is not a normal patrol. They're preparing for something big." "While telling us to reduce our fleet," Diane said quietly. "Interesting timing." "There's more," the Admiral continued. "President Crawford wants you to know that 6 Council trade ships have canceled their scheduled stops at Earth ports in the last 2 days. It's like they already know these talks will fail." Diane thought for a moment. "Keep our forces on alert, but don't make any obvious moves. I need more time here to understand what's really happening." After the call ended, there was a soft knock at her door. Commander Frank Nichols entered, followed by a slim alien with pale blue skin and large eyes. Diane recognized him as one of the junior council aides. "Ambassador, this is Thrillax," Frank said in a low voice. "He wants to talk to us, privately." The alien looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room. "Your communication is secure?" Diane nodded. "Completely." "I risk much by coming here," Thrillax said. "My people, the Vexari, are one of the smallest council races. We have suffered under council policies for generations." He pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. A hologram appeared showing several council ships and trade agreements. "The Terex and Arcturians have already prepared economic sanctions against Earth. They will be implemented immediately after you sign any agreement." Thrillax pointed to the data. "Look here, trade routes already redrawn. Resource allocations shifted. They plan to isolate your colonies one by one." Frank studied the information. "Why tell us this?" "Because my people know what it means to be protected by the Council," Thrillax said bitterly. "We hoped humans might be different, might change things." After Thrillax left, Diane called in Kevin Ross, their military analyst. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. "What do you make of this?" Diane asked, showing him the data. Kevin studied it carefully. "It confirms what we suspected. These peace terms would leave our outer colonies exposed. No council protection, but also limited ability to defend ourselves." He pointed to a section about shipping lanes. "And look here. They're creating perfect ambush points for pirates to hit our supply ships. Pirates with advanced weapons that somehow match Council technology," Frank added. "A classic strategy," Kevin nodded. "They weaken us, allow attacks through third parties, then offer better protection in exchange for more concessions." Diane stood up and walked to the window. "So we're looking at a slow stranglehold rather than direct conflict." "Exactly," Kevin said. "They don't want war. Too risky. They want us dependent and controlled." Frank crossed his arms. "So what's our move?" Diane turned back to them, her mind made up. "We need to stall. Push for better terms while gathering more information. And we activate Protocol Omega as a contingency plan." "That's a big step," Frank said carefully. "Earth would be on its own." "Maybe," Diane replied. "Or maybe the Council isn't as united as they want us to believe. I've seen how the Javari and Solari representatives react when the Terex speak. There are cracks we can use." She picked up Thrillax's data device. "And it seems we may have unexpected allies. Let's continue the talks tomorrow, but keep our ships ready. This game is just beginning." The next day, Diane noticed something interesting in the Council chamber. When the Terex representative Drakmor spoke about stricter terms for humans, the Javari ambassador clicked her mandibles in what seemed like disagreement. And when the Arcturian elder pushed for human weapon limitations, the Solari representative's skin changed from its normal golden color to a slight red. These were small things, but to Diane, they were important signs. The Council was not as united as they wanted humans to believe. During the lunch break, Diane managed to position herself near the Javari ambassador in the dining area, the tall insect-like being turned all four of her eyes toward the human. "Ambassador Harper," she said in her clicking voice, "the Javari admire how humans handled the pirate attacks in the Outer Rim last year. Very efficient." "Thank you," Diane replied carefully. "We believe in solving problems directly. A good approach." The Javari leaned closer. "Not all council races agree with the current terms being offered to humans. Some of us remember when we were newcomers too." Before Diane could respond, the Solari representative joined them. His golden skin shimmered as he spoke. "Indeed, the Solari value innovation. Humans have created many interesting technologies in a short time." He looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "We would prefer to trade with humans rather than restrict them." This was valuable information. Diane sent Frank a signal with her eyes, and he smoothly joined the conversation, keeping it casual while Diane gathered more details about the council divisions. Later that day, as the formal talks continued, Diane carefully used what she had learned. When Drakmor demanded that humans share their new engine technology, Diane mentioned how that technology had helped save a Javari ship near Mars. The Javari representative immediately supported a less restrictive policy. When Zixforal insisted on council inspectors at all human ports, Diane talked about how Earth scientists were working on new medical treatments that would benefit all species. The Solari, known for their interest in medicine, suggested a more balanced approach. Slowly, Diane began to create small cracks in the Council's united front. Some of the smaller races began to speak up too, asking why humans faced stricter terms than they had when joining. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Alexis Crawford met with her defense secretary in the secure White House bunker. "How are our preparations coming, Paul?" she asked. Defense Secretary Paul Martinez brought up a holographic map showing Earth's colonies and fleet positions. "We've quietly moved our reserve ships to key points," he said. "If talks fail, we can protect our main colonies and trade routes. Not forever, but long enough to show we're serious." The president nodded. "And Protocol Omega? Ready if needed, though I hope it doesn't come to that." "So do I," President Crawford sighed. "But we need to be prepared for all possibilities." At that moment, Lieutenant Olivia Bennett entered Diane's office on the diplomatic vessel. Her job was to monitor council communications, and she looked concerned. "Ambassador, we've intercepted some interesting transmissions," she said, showing Diane her datapad. "Several council ships are changing positions in what looks like a containment pattern around human space. They're being careful, moving only a few ships at a time, but the pattern is clear." Diane studied the information. "So they're preparing for us to say no." "It appears that way," Olivia agreed. "And there's more. Some smaller council races seem to be pulling their ships back, away from the potential conflict zone. They don't want to be involved if something happens." Diane thought for a moment. "That confirms what I've been seeing in the council chamber. Not everyone supports the Terex and Arcturian position." She looked at Olivia. "Keep monitoring. I need to know exactly who stands where." "Yes, Ambassador." As Olivia left, Diane turned to look out at the stars. The divisions in the council could be useful, but time was running short. Tomorrow would be critical. The peace talks had been going for 2 weeks now. Each day, the terms seemed to get worse for humans. Diane sat at the table in the main council chamber, listening as Drakmor, the Terex representative, presented what he called their final offer. "The council has been very patient," he said, his reptilian eyes cold. "But we must move forward. These are our final terms." Diane looked at the document on her screen. The council demanded that Earth reduce its fleet by 80%. Humans would need to share all their technology. Council inspectors would have full access to Earth's factories and shipyards. In return, humans would get basic trade rights and could attend council meetings as observers only, with no voting power. "You have 24 hours to accept," Drakmor added. His voice became lower, almost threatening. The Council hopes Earth will make the wise choice. There would be consequences to rejection. Diane kept her face calm, though inside she felt angry. "We will consider your terms carefully," she said. When the session ended, Diane and Frank returned to their ship immediately. Lieutenant Olivia Bennett was waiting for them, her face serious. "We've got a problem," Olivia said as soon as the door closed. She showed them new data on her screen. Terex military ships are moving into position near 4 of our colonies. They're trying to hide it, but our deep space sensors caught them. Frank looked grim. "They're preparing for a containment action, no matter what we decide." "There's more," Olivia continued. "We've intercepted communications between the Terex and Arcturians. They've already agreed to split up human territory between them after we're pacified." Diane activated the quantum link to Earth. Admiral Wells appeared, along with President Crawford. "We've received the final terms," Diane said. "They're even worse than before. And now we have proof they're positioning for military action, regardless of our answer." President Crawford looked tired but determined. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" "They're not negotiating in good faith," Diane replied. "They want us weakened or controlled. I don't see a path to fair terms." The president was quiet for a moment. "Then perhaps it's time for Protocol Omega." Admiral Wells nodded in agreement. "Our forces are ready. We can hold our own if it comes to that." "It won't be easy," Frank warned. "The Council has more ships." "But they're divided," Diane reminded him. "The Javari and Solari might not join any action against us. Several smaller races are already pulling back." President Crawford made her decision. "Request 24 hours to consider their terms. Use that time to prepare for withdrawal. But before you leave, make sure the entire galaxy knows why." "Yes, Madam President," Diane said. After the call ended, Diane turned to her team. "I need everything we have on Council movements, secret communications, the economic plans they've made against us. Everything." "What are you planning?" Frank asked. "If we're going to walk away," Diane said, "we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. No one will be able to say humans didn't try for peace." Kevin Ross, their analyst, started organizing the data. "I can have everything ready by morning. All the evidence of their bad faith." "Good," Diane said. "Olivia, prepare a special data packet. I want it ready to distribute to every Council race and independent world when we leave." "And me?" Frank asked. "Make sure our ship is ready for immediate departure and alert Earth forces to be prepared for anything." As her team went to work, Diane looked out at the beautiful Council world below. Tomorrow would change the course of human history in the galaxy. She felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a sense of calm. The Council had made their choice. Now, humans would make theirs. The next day, the Council chamber was completely full. News of the final offer to humans had spread, and representatives from every world wanted to see what would happen. Diane walked in with Frank beside her. Both wore their formal Earth uniforms with perfect posture. They showed no fear. Zixvorel, the Arcturian elder, spoke first. "Has Earth reached a decision on our generous terms?" Diane stepped forward to the speaker's platform. The room became very quiet. Everyone could feel this was an important moment. "The people of Earth thank the Council for their time," Diane began, her voice strong and clear. "We came here seeking fair and honest peace between equals. We have carefully considered your final offer." She paused, looking directly at each of the main Council members. "Earth respectfully declines your terms." A wave of whispers swept through the room. Trackmore's scales darkened in anger. "Perhaps you don't understand the consequences of refusal," he said sharply. "We understand perfectly," Diane replied calmly. "That's why I would like to share some information with the full Council before we conclude." She pressed a button on her wrist device. The large screens around the chamber lit up with images, data, and recordings. "These are Terex military ships moving into position near our colonies," Diane said, pointing to the first images. This movement began 3 days before your final offer was even presented. More images appeared. These are communications between council leaders planning economic sanctions against Earth, sanctions prepared weeks ago, before these talks even started. Gasps came from some of the smaller council races who hadn't known about these plans. And this, Diane continued, is a recording of a private meeting between the Terrex and Arcturian representatives, discussing how they would divide human territory after we were contained. A meeting that happened yesterday, while we were supposedly still negotiating in good faith. The chamber erupted in noise. The Javeri representative stood up, mandibles clicking rapidly in what humans had learned was a sign of anger. "Is this true?" she demanded, looking at Drakmor and Sixforal. Neither answered directly. Sixforal tried to regain control. "These are security matters that don't concern." "They concern all council members," interrupted the Solari representative, his skin now bright red with emotion. "We were not consulted about military action." Diane let the chaos continue for a moment before speaking again. "Humanity came here hoping to join a community of equals. Instead, we found a system where the powerful use the rules to control the weak. We found leaders who speak of peace while preparing for war." She gathered her materials slowly. "Earth will not surrender its sovereignty or security. We will not disarm while you position your ships around our worlds. We will not join a council that has already decided to treat us as subjects rather than partners." Frank stepped forward and placed a small data cube on the central table. "This contains all the evidence we've presented today, plus more. It's now being transmitted to every world in the galaxy. The truth should be available to all." The room fell silent as Diane delivered her final words. "We came seeking peace between equals. You sought submission. Earth respectfully withdraws from these talks." With that, Diane and Frank simply turned and walked out of the chamber. The human delegation followed behind them in a single line, heads held high. No rushing, no anger shown on their faces, just a calm, dignified exit that everyone watching would remember. As they boarded their ship, the UES Determination, Diane could see through the viewports that the council chamber was in complete chaos. Arguments had broken out between different factions. The carefully controlled unity of the Galactic Council was cracking before her eyes. "Set course for Earth," she told the captain, "and send word to all human ships and colonies. Protocol Omega is now in full effect." News of the human walkout spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The data packet Diane had released was being viewed on every world. On the human colony of Novaterra, thousands of people gathered in the main square to watch Governor Jack Harrison speak. "Citizens of Novaterra," he said from a simple platform, "by now you've heard that our diplomatic team has left the peace talks. I want to assure you that we are safe and our defenses are strong." A woman in the crowd called out, "Are we going to war with the council?" Governor Harrison shook his head. "No, we are simply standing our ground. Our ships are on alert, but only to protect what is ours. Go about your lives normally. Plant your crops. Teach your children. Build your homes. That is how we show the galaxy that humans are not afraid." The crowd cheered. Humans had always been good at facing challenges together. On Earth, military bases were busy but controlled. Ships moved into defensive positions around all colonies. Soldiers said goodbye to families as they reported for duty. But there was no panic. Earth had prepared for this possibility for years. In the Council territories, the situation was very different. Markets fell as trade agreements with humans suddenly became uncertain. Human goods were popular across many worlds, and now no one knew if they would still be available. At Council headquarters, emergency meetings ran day and night. The Javeri representative publicly questioned why military plans had been made without full Council approval. The Solari demanded to know why the evidence the humans had presented hadn't been shared with all members. 4 of the smaller Council races called for investigations into the actions of the Terrex and Arcturians. Trust between the species had been damaged. In a private meeting room, The Javari ambassador activated a secure channel to Earth. President Crawford answered personally. "Ambassador, I'm surprised to hear from you," the president said. The Javari's mandibles clicked softly. What happened in the council chamber was unfortunate. The Javari do not support the actions of the Tereks and Arcturians. We believe the treatment of humans was unjust. I appreciate hearing that, President Crawford replied carefully. The Javari would be interested in discussing separate agreements between our peoples, the ambassador continued. Trade, cultural exchange, perhaps even security cooperation, without council involvement. This was exactly what Diane had hoped might happen. Cracks in the council's unity could create new opportunities for Earth. Meanwhile, in Tarek space, their military leaders were meeting. Admiral Zexcran, their fleet commander, looked angry. The humans must be contained before they grow too powerful, he insisted, pounding his scaled fist on the table. They are a threat to the established order. General Voss, the ground forces leader, seemed less certain. The data they released shows they know our military positions. They were more prepared than we thought. It doesn't matter, Zexcran replied. We still have more ships, more allies. We will establish a blockade around human space, cut them off, force them to accept our terms. In his private office on the Arcturian homeworld, Elder Zixvoral stared at reports showing 4 minor council races threatening to withdraw from the council entirely. They cited the treatment of humans as evidence that smaller species couldn't trust the larger ones. This is becoming a bigger problem than just the humans, he muttered to his aide. On the human ship returning to Earth, Diane watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Frank stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. The council is facing internal pressure, she noted, and 3 independent trading worlds have already contacted Earth about direct agreements. Frank nodded. The Tereks are still moving their ships, though. They're not giving up. No, they're not, Diane agreed. But neither are we. And now the galaxy is watching to see what happens next. 3 weeks after the human walkout, the Galactic Council faced its biggest crisis in 500 years. 4 minor races, the Vexari, Talon, Briat, and Nexori, officially announced their withdrawal from the Council. Their joint statement mentioned the treatment of humanity as clear evidence that the Council no longer worked for the benefit of all members. In the Grand Council chamber that now felt much emptier, Zixvoral struggled to maintain order as arguments broke out between the remaining members. This is the humans' fault, Drakmor insisted, his reptilian features twisted with anger. They planned this disruption from the beginning. The Solari representative stood up, his golden skin pulsing with light. The humans simply expose what many of us already knew. The Council has become a tool for the strongest to control the rest. We Solari are considering our own position. This sent a new wave of shock through the chamber. The Solari were founding members of the Council. If they left too, the entire system might collapse. Meanwhile, a Terex military patrol approached the edge of human space. Admiral Zexcran had ordered them to establish the first point of a planned blockade. As the 5 Terex ships moved toward their position, sensors detected something unexpected. Admiral, the patrol commander reported back. We're detecting a defensive network around the human border. Automated platforms, sensor arrays, and what appear to be weapon systems. None of this appeared in our intelligence reports. On Earth, Admiral Samantha Wells met with President Crawford in the Secure Command Center beneath Washington. On the main screen, they could see the Terex patrol that had just arrived at the border. Should we hail them? The President asked. Admiral Wells shook her head. Let them see what we want them to see. That defensive network took years to build in secret. Now it's serving its purpose without firing a shot. How long have we been preparing for this? President Crawford asked quietly. Since our first contact with the Council 12 years ago, the Admiral replied. When they demanded our ship designs but offered nothing in return, we knew they might not be true allies. So we developed 2 paths. Public technology they could see, and secret systems they couldn't. On the frontier between human and council space, an unmanned scientific outpost monitored a nearby nebula. Suddenly, 3 Terex ships appeared and opened fire without warning. They clearly expected to destroy the outpost quickly as a show of force. Instead, hidden defensive systems activated instantly. Precisely targeted energy beams disabled the Terex weapons without destroying their ships. When the surprised Terex commander ordered retreat, his engines wouldn't respond. Within minutes, 4 human ships appeared from what had seemed to be empty space. They surrounded the Terex vessels, but made no aggressive moves. Terex vessels, came the calm voice of the human captain. Your unprovoked attack on a scientific outpost has been recorded and transmitted throughout the galaxy. Your weapons have been temporarily disabled. We will escort you back to Council space. There need be no further conflict if you cooperate. The stunned Terex had no choice but to agree. News of this encounter spread quickly. The Javari ambassador officially contacted Earth to begin separate trade negotiations. The Solari followed a day later. In Diane's new office on Earth, she now served as Secretary of Interstellar Relations. Frank entered with the latest reports. 4 former council races have asked to open diplomatic relations, he said, and 3 more are considering leaving the council. Diane nodded. The Terex miscalculated badly with that attack. Our response showed strength without aggression. Perfect. There's more, Frank continued. The Javari are suggesting something beyond just trade agreements. They're talking about a possible new alliance system, one based on equality rather than control. Diane smiled slightly, exactly what we hoped would happen. The old order is changing, Frank, and humanity didn't fire a single shot to make it happen. 6 months had passed since humans walked away from the peace talks. The galaxy had changed in ways no one expected. The once mighty Galactic Council now had only 11 members, down from the original 17. Many of their former members had joined a new alliance with humanity. On Earth, in the Grand United Nations building in New York, representatives from 12 species gathered for a historic moment. Diane Harper, now serving as Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Relations, stood at the center of the room. Beside her were the Javari ambassador, the Solari delegate, and leaders from 5 former council races, including the Vexari, Talon, and Briat. Today we signed the Mutual Cooperation Accord, Diane announced to the assembled group and the billions watching on screens across many worlds. This agreement establishes a new relationship between our peoples based on 3 simple principles: equal treatment for all members, shared defense responsibilities, and open exchange of technology for the benefit of all. One by one, the representatives stepped forward to sign the document. The room felt charged with hope and possibility. This is not an empire, the Javari ambassador said when it was her turn to speak. Nor is it a council where the strong command the weak. It is a true partnership where each voice matters equally. On his colony world, Governor Jack Harrison watched the ceremony with a smile. His people had lived in fear of council action for months. Now they would be part of something better. Meanwhile, the remains of the Galactic Council held emergency sessions. Elder Zixforl's influence had diminished greatly after the failure of the human peace talks. The Arcturians had lost face, and many questioned their judgment. We must adapt to this new reality, one of the remaining members argued. The humans have created a more attractive alternative to our system. We must reform or continue to lose members. Drakmor of the Terex still refused to accept the changes. This human alliance is a threat to the established order. We should confront them now, before they grow stronger. But few supported his view anymore. The carefully controlled demonstration of human defensive capabilities had made many council races hesitant to consider military action. Back on Earth, after the signing ceremony ended, Diane noticed the Arcturian representative watching from the side of the room. He had attended as an observer only, not a participant. She walked over to him. "I'm surprised to see you here, Elder Cortal," she said to the Arcturian. He had replaced Zixforl after the Elder was forced to step down. I came to understand what we are facing, Cortal replied. His purple skin seemed faded compared to what Diane remembered of his species. Our council is shrinking while your alliance grows. You're welcome to join us as equals, Diane offered. The door remains open. The Arctarian looked at her with all 6 of his eyes. We misunderstood your species. We thought your willingness to negotiate signaled weakness. Diane smiled diplomatically. A common misconception. Humans don't negotiate because we're weak. We negotiate because war is inefficient. But when negotiations fail, she left the sentence unfinished, letting the implication hang in the air. Cortal nodded slowly. I will bring this perspective back to my people. As the Arctarian walked away, Frank joined Diane at the window overlooking the New York skyline. 10 new worlds have applied to join our alliance in the last week alone, he told her. The Mutual Cooperation Accord is changing everything. Diane watched ships from a dozen worlds flying peacefully above the city. Some were designs humans had never seen before, from cultures eager to connect now that the Council's restrictions were gone. This is just the beginning, she said quietly. The Council tried to contain us because they feared change. But change was exactly what the galaxy needed. Frank smiled. And all we had to do was walk away.